Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and I would like to tell you about my favorite books that I read in 2017. I had 4 books that stood out to me as being my top picks for the year. Books that, without even batting an eye, I recommended. They had a huge impact on me, and I just love them. And I didn't even have to go back and look through my list of what I read to think of them. They just came to mind. In fact, when I read them, I thought, with all 4 of these, this is going to be one of my top books for the year. So, I did come up, though, with one that I had kind of forgotten about, that when I heard someone else talking about it, I thought, you know what? That one really does deserve an honorable mention. Even though I didn't think about it in the list initially, I was just going to go with 4, but it turns out I actually do have 5 that I will tell you about. But before I do that, I will tell you about one book that I would consider my biggest disappointment. Now, I say that, but it doesn't mean that this was my worst book of the year. I had at least 4 books that I rated 2 stars. I was pretty generous with my 5-star books this year. I gave a lot of books 5 stars, and quite a lot, of course, 4 stars, and quite a lot 3 stars. This book I gave 3 stars, and I didn't hate it at all, but I wanted to love it so much. And it just really disappointed me. I didn't want it to be a 3-star book. I wanted it to be a 5-star book. And what I'm talking about is The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend. The premise was cute. I really was expecting big things from this book. I had high hopes. And it's about a young woman named Sarah. She is from Sweden, and she has traveled all the way to Broken Wheel, Iowa, to meet a pen pal that she's been conversing with for quite some time. And when she gets there, her pen pal has died, and the funeral is just ending. So she doesn't really know what to do, because she was kind of at a crossroads in her life to begin with. So the people from the town encourage her to stay, and she ends up opening a bookstore with the books from her friend's home. And it kind of goes from there. Well, that part was fine. I enjoyed that story. The characters from the town are just really quirky and fun, but they're just a little too quirky for my taste. And where I think the story really went south for me is the May-December romance that happened. And it wasn't even so much about the ages, even though it was cringy. I think what disappointed me most about that is that the woman who was the older one in the relationship, she was a woman of principles, to the point where, people kind of made fun of her for it. But I am a woman of principles, and I'm sure people make fun of me. And I was really disappointed that she lowered her principles and let down her, I don't know, I don't want to say let down her guard, but she should have stuck to her guns. She should have lived up to her principles instead of just letting herself be led into this relationship. That's my opinion. Okay. You may have a completely different opinion, and that you are entitled to it. But that's what bothered me about the book. That whole storyline, I just didn't like. I didn't dislike either of the characters in the relationship, but it just, I don't know. It was just weird. So that was just me. So, anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this book, but it was my biggest disappointment. I would rather spend more time, though, on the books that I loved. And this is my honorable mention, A Man Called Uva by Fredrik Backman. I thought this was fantastic. So sweet, so endearing. This older gentleman who has nothing left to live for, at least he doesn't think so. This cat comes up. I don't know if it was a neighborhood cat, or maybe it was his wife's cat. I don't know. The cat won't leave him alone. He has new neighbors, and they won't leave him alone. And just everything is around him is just annoying him, and he just wants to be left alone. And nobody will leave him alone. So if you haven't read this, you really should. It is fantastic. Okay, so now, of my top 4, the one I want to talk about first is the one that's most fresh on my mind. I believe this was my most read author this year. I read 10 books by Donna VanLiere just this year. I read 8 of them, actually 9 of them in December because they were Christmas themed books. And then I read this one just a few months ago. I loved it so much that I encouraged my local book club to read it, and we just discussed it this month. And I believe everybody who read it really enjoyed it, but we all agreed that there wasn't enough justice done in the end, and we would like to see a sequel. So I'm going to be contacting Donna VanLiere very soon and asking, begging, pleading for her to please write a sequel, because this book was so good. It's set in 1950 Tennessee, and it comes, there's 3 perspectives. Our main character, Ivory, and she is in her early 30s. Her mother has just died, and she's single, so in that day she's considered an old maid. She spends her time gardening, canning, working around her farmhouse, and someone is stealing from her garden. And the other perspective is from this young boy. We learn a little bit about him from the beginning, but we don't really know. We just know that he is going through some horrific circumstances at home. I don't want to give away much more than that. Then later on, we get a 3rd perspective added, and it is Ivory's brother, Henry. And his perspective kind of tells you what the town is thinking as the story progresses. It's just a fantastic book. I definitely recommend it, especially all of you guys who read the Christmas Hope series by Donna VanLiere. I think you will love this too. So then the next book I want to talk about has also been talked about on BookTube recently. I read it this year. It is The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. This book was so compelling. It had such an impact on me. It is horrific in the things that happen to the people. It's heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. But oh my goodness, it is told so beautifully. It starts out about a little girl who is from Ireland. She's orphaned on a ship on the way to the U.S., and so the captain of the boat takes her to his plantation and basically hands her over to his slaves to raise. And one of his slaves is also his illegitimate daughter. And it just goes from there. It's just a super interesting dynamic, and just a very compelling book. There is a sequel. It's not really a series. I wouldn't consider it a series, but there is a sequel book called Glory Over Everything. Our book club is going to be reading that later this year, and I am definitely looking forward to it. Then, going back to a little earlier in the year, this is one of the earliest books I read. It just had such an impact on me. I loved this book so much, mainly for the humor of it. It's not really well, I don't know. I started to say it's not really a humorous book, but it is. There's a lot of funny parts. But it's just really a wonderful snapshot of this time period. It is set in 1906, the summer of 1906, and it's about a young boy named Will. And at the very beginning of the book, his grandmother has died, I think just 2 or 3 weeks prior. And his grandfather, who was the owner of the general store there in their small town of Sassy, he announces to his 2 daughters, and his grandson is there on the premises and overhears. He announces that he's getting married, and of course his daughters are scandalized because their mother has just died a couple of weeks before, and so they're kind of trying to wrap their mind around this announcement, and they're thinking, okay, well, he can't get married for another year, so maybe by that time people won't be so critical and all that. Well, no, he's not waiting a year. He's getting married like that day. And so it's crazy, in that time frame, in that time period, that just wasn't done. So he's just, he's quite a character, the grandfather. And it's told from the perspective of Will, who I think is 14. And I just love the characters, the banter back and forth, the setting is just wonderful. I love books from the South. I mean, can you tell? I love them. They're so good. And I definitely thought this was just a fantastic book. Now, there is a sequel called Leaving Cold Sassy. It is labeled an unfinished sequel because the author, Olive Ann Burns, passed away while she was writing it. I found out when I read that book that the character of Will is actually based on Olive Ann Burns' father. So, in reading some of the reviews, a lot of people said that they did not like Leaving Cold Sassy. And I thought, well, you know, it's unfinished, so what's not to like? But I can see, after reading it, I can see what they're talking about. Because it does kind of go in a direction that is not very favorable as far as Will and his character as an adult. He doesn't grow up to be all that you hope and dream he will be. And maybe that's because that was what happened with her father. I don't know. And maybe she was trying to stay true to life. But we'll never know because it wasn't finished. And all we have are some of her ideas. And we have the beginning of the story. And then just some notes and ideas for where the editor thought she was going to take the story after that. But if you like this, it's definitely worth picking up. Just don't expect big things from it. But Cold Sassy Tree is just fantastic. Okay, now my last one will be no secret to most of you who have been following my channel for a while, because I've been raving about this book since I read it in February. I said then, this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year, and it definitely is. It is The Summer I Saved the World in 65 Days by Michele Hurwitz. I just love this book. It had such a big impact on me. I recommended it to several other booktubers, and I have seen at least a couple of them who have read it and talked about it on their channel. They also loved it, and that's such a relief to hear, because, as booktubers, we talk about books all day and we recommend books. And then when somebody actually picks up a book we recommend and reads it, it's kind of like, oh, I hope they're going to like it, and it's always a relief when they do. But I know that Lisa from Books and Smiles read it and loved it. Krista from Books and Jams read it and loved it. So I'm so glad you guys did. Thank you so much for taking my recommendation and reading the book. But this was one of our Sunshine State books for last school year. It's kind of a cross between a middle grade and a YA book. It's about a girl who is in the summer between her last year middle school and first year of high school. So it's really appropriate for either age group. And she says right in the beginning, she's not the type of girl who really just goes out of her way to do things for other people. But through laying in her hammock for a couple of days at the beginning of the summer and watching her neighborhood, she lives in a cul-de-sac, she decides that she's going to do some things for people, and she's going to keep it anonymous. Now, I did a full review of this book on my channel. I will link it down below, so I'm not going to go into too much detail now. I will say what I said then. If we would all read this book, I think we would achieve world peace. It's just so good. I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. I just love it so much. So that is it. That is my list of my top 5 favorite books that I read in 2017. I have really loved watching all of your videos. If you did a video about your top books and your favorites, it has just been a lot of fun. I'm not going to do a video about my least favorites. I don't even want to think about those. That's why I went ahead and threw in the one that was my biggest disappointment. But like I said, it wasn't even my least favorite. So that's it, I guess. I just wanted to share. So hopefully very soon I will have my 2017 goals revisited, let you know if I accomplished all my goals, and then what my goals are for 2018. I have some, what I think are really awesome goals coming up very soon. So that's it for this video. I hope you are having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.